there isn't anybody in Central Ohio that is more connected or more entrepreneurial from a programming and educational and whatnot basis than our speaker today. I've had the pleasure of knowing Mike Bowers for many years now. Goes all the way back at least to 2009 when the Dublin Entrepreneurial Center was launched by the city of Dublin, and Small Business Development Centers, or SBDC, was such an integral part of the launch of the DEC. And SBDC is such a great organization here in Central Ohio and nationwide. Every single county in the United States is served by an SBDC organization. And our speaker today is actually the head of the one for Central Ohio. So we've got the guy who's in charge. He's got a wonderful staff of people that are there to there to help entrepreneurs, to help people get their businesses started and grow, and have some wonderful classes there that they have available, and mentoring. Our Noble Academy program, which I know some of you are familiar with, our Noble Academy program, which launched here just the end of 22, is a merge of my Young Entrepreneurs Academy program that I've been doing for the last 8-9 years and Noble. We wanted to not just have young entrepreneurs of ages middle school and high school, but we wanted to have middle schoolers and high school and adults. So now we graduated 3 classes of Noble Academy. Our last one was last Saturday, and excited to say that we have over 30 new businesses that we helped to launch in those 3 classes. We Noble helped to pay out over $20,000 in investor sponsorships of those businesses, and excited to say that some of the businesses are just already cranked up and rolling, and we're excited for all that. But again, SBDC is part of that. So they actually teach our 3rd section of that class, which actually we're expanding in the future. So now, instead of having 1 day of teaching our 3rd class, actually students are going to, and when I say students, I mean all ages, but our students are going to be able to go online. It's a series of how many classes that you have in BizStart in 1 month? 4. Okay. So whereas we normally, the last 3 classes have brought them in to teach in 1 day, we're now going to say, okay, we're clearing this month of teaching Noble Academy, and you'll be able to do these 4 classes online with SBDC. So they're even going to get more in that regard. So we're just excited how Noble Academy is evolving and continuing to get better. But again, SBDC is right along their side of it. So it's just such a great organization to be a part of. And Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to put this event together. You gave us a little teaser with our Noble Forum, but now we're going to get the whole thing. So I'm excited to hear the whole thing too. And so Mike Bowers, come on up here. Thank you so much. Nobody better to learn from here in Central Ohio. So,
well, thank you, Chaz. I appreciate that. As Chaz says, my name is Mike, and I've been working with the Small Business Development Center, working with entrepreneurs. I've probably been working with entrepreneurs through that and banking and everything else that I've done. Probably, I'm going to say 30 years, might be longer, but I'm going to say 30 years. And as Chad says, I mean, I've had the pleasure to work with him, with Rob, with Susie now, and a lot of the team to really share entrepreneurial lessons, how to start businesses, grow businesses, build businesses, and for years, and it's been a great experience. What we're going to talk about today is a little bit different than what I normally talk about. If we were going to do just how to start your own business, I wouldn't have had to prep anything. I could just get out of bed and come in here and do, now an hour and a half, that's the problem. But what we're going to do today is we are going to talk about driving organizational success with biblical leadership. So the thought process is that most of us work in organizations, we work with more secular organizations. And there's a lot of leadership training, leadership theory that goes along with that. Unfortunately, it kind of stops when you get to the biblical concepts that go along with that. But really, the biblical concepts are always can be embedded in that. And for the individual leader who's working within that, they can use this to actually improve their presentation, their organizational slide.
Sorry.
No, it's fine.
Slide. I want them.
Yeah. So what we're going to do is that we've got some slides. I've got a couple of videos in here. I've been kind of working on this. So the original one that I put together was 16 minutes for just the kind of teaser for the online piece. And I've gone back and forth with Susie on this. So I think I have this one down to 4 hours and 80 minutes. So we should be good. We should be good. I wasn't sure. I'm glad everybody's kind of dressed the same way because I went out and asked Susie yesterday, what's the attire? Is this kind of creative black tie or what am I supposed to wear? She said that, it's a Saturday morning. So I didn't know if that meant I was supposed to wear my pajamas or what I'm supposed to do, but I decided to go ahead and go this way. So what I'd like to do today is I'm going to share some information. Like I say, we've got a couple of videos that I think will be valuable. But what I'm going to do is that as we go through here, I'll ask you, we'll take a couple of minutes, ask you some questions, ask you to think about some things, ask you to jot some stuff down. So if you have paper, I know they put paper out, make sure you got a pen or something, just so that you can do this. So I'm not necessarily going to say we're going to go around and, Brian, tell me exactly what you put, because this is really more for you. And I think that as we finish this, you actually will be able to take the material there and think about it after you get out of here. And how do I start to implement these things into what I do on a regular basis? So, but what I will do is I will ask when we get done, if anybody wants to share what they have, any insights they may have, any questions they may have, things like that. So feel free to share what it is that you're doing, share, what you've put down. The folks online, don't let me forget about you. This is kind of freaking me out. The camera's right in my face, but other than that, it's pretty good. So we are going to go ahead and get rolling with, something for you to do. So we're going to do some brief introductions, but I want to give you a couple of seconds to jot down a couple of notes, because I want the introduction to be your name, kind of what do you do professionally. Now, if you're here because you're actively involved in a volunteer effort or something like that, this will be applicable. That's fine too. But, what do you do professionally? And give me an example of you being a leader in the past month. Okay. So when we do this, so this would be mine. So, what I do, I'm the center director for the Ohio Small Business Development Center at Columbus State Community College. As a director, I have a team. I have 7 people who work to help small business owners build and grow their businesses. So, something that, that I do, for example, is, we're in a temporary space at Columbus State. So I think we started at Columbus State in 2004. We've moved 6 times. So temporary space is kind of normal for me. But we're in a temporary space. And, recently I've got to work with the team to kind of reset our schedule, reset who's doing what, different things like that. So we can continue to provide our services, but not in the traditional way that we would have done it, with bringing people in, sitting down with people, because we don't have that capability right now. So everything primarily is Zoom, online, other locations. I have an office at the deck, so I get to go there and do some different things. So this is just an example of some things that I did in the last month. Okay, so go ahead and jot a couple things down. We're going to take just a couple of minutes for you to do that. And then I'm going to actually, this is the one point I'll ask you to give your name and actually point those things out. When I do ask you to share, I want to go with the elevator pitch concept. So by the elevator pitch where, like if I was at the deck, we're on the 3rd floor. So I would get on there with Chaz and I have until the 3rd floor to kind of say, hey, this is kind of what I do. And, to kind of do this, right? We are not in like the Freedom Tower. We're not going up. Okay. So just kind of, just real quick, we just go around real quick, get a sense of where everybody is and what everybody's up to, and then we'll go from there. So I'm going to give you just a couple minutes to do that, and then we'll jump back in.
Second ride rather than the 2-minute ride. So
That's right. Now, the elevators at the deck are pretty good, so
They're
they
pretty
don't,
fast, so.
they don't stop in the middle. I've been in some places where you get halfway up. We're not going to share individually. I mean, we're not going to work.
Oh, okay.
But we will share too.
And the
Yeah, just an example of you being a leader in the last. Okay, a couple more seconds. Okay, so if you're still working on, we'll continue to work with one ear open here. So we're just gonna go around real quick. We're gonna do that, and just so we all kind of have a sense. Some of you guys know each other, but maybe you don't know each other in this context. Kevin, you go ahead.
morning, everyone. My professional.
Outstanding. Chaz?
Hey, Chaz, and I'm excited to really my main role, or what I consider to be my main role, is working with Noble and to extend and grow Noble to more people. I traditionally, over the last 20 years, known folks more from helping them start or grow businesses or be more successful there again without the faith. And now being able to be aligned with Noble and be able to provide that from a faith perspective is fantastic. And from a leadership standpoint, just recently working with some Noble Academy classes that have recently graduated. Got a graduate sitting right over here, yay. As well as just being able to continue working with youth over the last week. Work with some camps, some students that helping them to get excited about going to work someday or potentially working for themselves someday. So excited about that.
Great, thank you. Brian?
leadership exam. Redirect. When we roll.
Great. I always like when we have husband and wife teams to share anything you said correct.
Oh my.
The interesting thing. That when we're working. Business.
Yeah.
It's all business, and sometimes we'll see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So hi there, I'm Sherry Miller. Companies to identify. This,
Great, great. Let's jump here. Jeff, you want to share?
Yeah, thanks. Hey, good morning, everyone. Jeff Burke, nice to see you. Unfortunately, we can't hear you online. I'm sure there've been some great, we can hear you great, Mike, just not anybody off camera. My professional world, I work for Nationwide Insurance. I'm a nurse by trade, but I've worked for Nationwide for 23 years, and I oversee a team of well-being and healthcare professionals who take care of our employees. Our employees are our customer. So every day we bear the burdens that our associates bring to us along a number of fronts. An example of being a leader in the past month. So this team, who again bears many of the burdens, things such as domestic violence, suicidal ideation, significant medical issues, cancer, et cetera, they come to our team to help them find paths forward. And my team bears a lot of that. So I observed that they were struggling through a number of conversations I had with the team, that they were struggling with bearing all that. And that's pretty typical for healthcare professionals. And so I went out and contracted with a mental health provider to come and meet with the team to do kind of a group debrief, to help them take care of themselves, essentially, so that they could focus on their own health and well-being, which ultimately down the road helps them to take care of our customers too. But I thought it was really important that they spend some time focusing on themselves and not just our associates. So that's my example.
Great, great. Is it Naz? That's what it says on the thing.
it's Deborah.
It's Deborah.
Deborah, you're on mute.
Can't hear.
Unmute your mic.
Can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Okay, yeah, that's my grandson. Anyway,
Yeah.
yes, Deborah Tribune, and I am I teach dance. I've been doing it for about 30 years, and I also I'm a seamstress, and so I've had many people come through my dance company and over the years. So I'm always getting people want a referral. Miss Debbie, can you refer me with this, that, and the other, or give me a recommendation? I've been getting that a lot. So I try to train up, because I teach like 3 years old to adults. So I try to teach them to keep a good track record of your life and do things that you say you're going to do, and be honest, because somebody's going to want a recommendation from you, how you act in school, or how you were with me when I was over you as a dance teacher. And so I always try to get them to keep their themselves in line and be honest and do the best that you can right now. And so, yeah, I've been having that a lot. Somebody also said, Miss Debbie, I worked for someone that wanted me to do something for them because they said they knew you. And so that makes me feel good, like, oh, okay. They said they knew you. And so I went on and did the work for them that they wanted me to do. And that's good to know, that people think of you that way, that I've had an influence on their lives over the years, and they want me to put in a good word for them. And then, when they say my name, oh, I know her. Yeah. Okay. I'll do it for you. Yeah.
Great, great. And Megan, I will say that you are a testament to how attractive your mother is. So, you want to share?
Well, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Megan Frutel, so I'm Chaz's daughter. I recently, in the last 6 months, started working with him and his business with the We Buy Cars America. So right now, mostly focusing on helping people locate vehicles and helping kind of streamline the process that we already have with buying and wholesale. I'm also looking towards getting a dealership location here in Dallas. So I'm kind of in the process of that right now. I would say an example of being a leader. I think I'm in kind of a transitional phase. I'm actually more of a learner in the last 6 months, I would say, coming from leading rather large teams in Dallas from my previous retail background. So I think right now it's learning and absorbing all the information and then being able to turn around and kind of use that to lead. But I guess, I'm helping people with locating vehicles. So I have had some success in that.
Great, great. Let's jump back down here. Mobile Academy.
Credit specialist, but I also am 115 pounds. And encourage others around me to do. That's how I am considered a leader.
Absolutely.
Well, I'll interject that she was the winner of our last class.
Wow.
The investor panel judges gave her the #1 presentation of all of them.
You're good. That's great.
That's wonderful.
Rob?
Well, hello. In healthcare. Two other companies. Is
Great. Great.
My name is. Oh. Um, and
Yeah.
from the reason. No, just you.
Yeah.
This is what I do.
That's definitely a need, I would say. I have two kids that are home one's home from college and one just graduated high school.
Okay.
And yeah, that's a big deal.
Mary just graduated from our other class and gave her presentations a couple weeks prior. Yeah. She holds a provisional or full patent on the product. Full patents on a product that she's trying to develop. So very impressive. So
Great.
it's a job.
Great.
So I'm Susie Gillen and I'm operations manager for Noble, but also. And so roles I've. You got. Grand opening.
Can't see you on the camera. There you go.
Oh, wow, there we go. I got to go to the main library's grand opening of their business and nonprofit resource center. And so I was intentional to meet the people who could be another guest speaker or come and lead and teach our students and our business owners to do deeper market research for their startup businesses or their ongoing businesses. So you'll see that coming.
Great. I like to do the typewriter thing, so we're gonna.
My background is law. Student village international. To discuss organizations in everybody, I'm Steve Wilson.
You mind? Well, we probably should have done this at the beginning. If you wouldn't mind walking around and coming up here. So they can't hear you and they can't see you. So give them a little more participation there. Yeah.
Yeah, I have no problem. Sorry, I'm Steve Wilson. I'm the owner and operator of Auto IT Solutions. We are a specialized automotive repair shop that's basically we repair anything that has to do with powertrain control modules, electronics. I typically work with automotive repair shops and or body shops. The leadership role was a hard one. That was a good curveball there for me. That, as I work by myself, so I'm not really with people, I'm not trying to bring a team up. But it goes back to morality, right? You gotta have good morals. I went out to a customer's house, a customer and his mobile mechanic called me. Was supposed to come out for an immobilizer issue, key problem with this vehicle. And a little bit more diagnosis, I found that there was not an immobilizer issue with this car. And I educated the customer as well as the mobile mechanic that, hey, digging a little more deep into the diagnostic process, here's what the actual problem is. And even though the mobile technician, this is his sole job, I gave him some insight not to belittle or go against his words, is bring him up as an individual so that he knows how to better diagnose and that we can work together in the future for more proper diagnosed jobs. So
That's good.
That's great. Doug?
Roll.
That's two people. All right, well, I'm Doug Frutal. I have a business that create digital experiences using audiovisual technologies to help enterprise organizations engage with their employees and allow end users to engage with each other. Probably the formal leadership, our company's been going through a big transition. And so as I'm kind of getting into the point of looking at my exit strategy of the company and turning things over to the leadership team, and the next generation. So learning to be present with them in as we're making these transitions to let them drive and explore the solutions versus me coming up with with all the solutions. So just learning to be present with the leadership team to allow them a place to leverage their leadership abilities.
Great. So thank everyone for getting up and talking about that, because I think it's important to kind of be intentional about when we're thinking about leadership or thinking about anything that you're doing. I mean, it's the same thing that we do when we're talking about entrepreneurship. I can tell people that you need to focus on your customer when you're an entrepreneur. You're a small business owner, you got to focus on the customer. And everybody said, oh, I know that. But until I tell them, until they internalize that, they may not do it, right? So that's why I think it's important to always be thinking about, okay, really taking a step back and try to say, okay, this is what I'm doing. This is, in this case, how I'm leading, different things of that nature. So again, thank everybody for going through that. So what we're going to talk about, so one, for y'all online, you're going to have to see the slides through the camera. So hopefully you can see that. I think Susie is going to send the slides, and I think we're recording it, so you can send that. So, and if anybody has any questions down the road, I think she can share my contact information also. But what I want to talk about, we're going to talk about really this organizational leadership concept. So, organizational leadership really is associated with accomplishment of business goals in this case. Okay. So a lot of times we get into this leadership and we don't, in this case, tie it to the organizational goals and where we're trying to go as an organization. And that's really kind of the end goal. When you're in an organization, you're in a business, you're in your own business. You're trying to enhance these organizational goals. This conversation today, what I want to do is I want to talk about how biblical leadership principles can impact and influence contemporary leadership modules and lead to better organizational results. So I know Jeff, before we started, shared that he's in a leadership program, working on a doctoral degree in leadership and servant leadership. And I'm doing the same thing, kind of. It's not organizational leadership, but I'm working on a doctoral program from Liberty University in public administration. So this presentation kind of came out of a course that I had last semester where we were learning about traditional leadership theory and then how we can tie the biblical concepts in with that, or how they do tie in with that. And so that's kind of where a lot of this is coming from. And I think it's critical, again, to understand that organizations are going to do what organizations do. I think, so we work like AEP, I think, and Jeff works for Nationwide, different things of that nature. I mean, these are organizations and they have their ways of doing things. If you, as individuals, recognize that what you are doing is actually providing leadership in a variety of ways, you can take what's going on at the organization, what leadership practices they're implementing or using, and then bring in biblical concepts for yourself to make yourself a better leader within that system. Okay. And I would say that, people often ask me, tell me about entrepreneurship books and different things, how to be an entrepreneur, how to start a business. And, when we talk about leadership, people do the same things. Tell me about leadership books that can help you. Well, to be totally honest, the best leadership book is the Bible. There is so much in there that can guide you as you are leading yourself and leading others within an organization. So I encourage you to take a look at that. So as we think about leadership, you heard everybody, you guys didn't, but everybody else heard everybody, that, there's a lot of stuff going on as a leader. Okay. And I think that a lot of folks today talked about, some internal responsibilities, things they're doing with their staff or things they're doing with their team. I think you talked about some stuff you were doing with the customers. So this is kind of external. So you got to step outside the organization. You're talking to customers and different things of that nature. And then there's a strategic responsibility about how the organization is going to go forward. So if you are an entrepreneur, you have your own business, you're a business owner, then you're doing this on a pretty regular basis, whether you know it or not. Being strategic about what the next steps are, what you're doing. And by being strategic and responsible, you are focusing the direction of the organization and giving yourself direction on where to go. But what we all need to understand is that as leaders, whether you're in your own business, you're an entrepreneur, you're working for an organization, you're doing all of these things. Sometimes you're doing them simultaneously. So being a leader can get pretty hectic. It's pretty complex at times. And it's pretty easy for us to feel sorry for ourselves. This is hard. This isn't working. My team's not responding. I can't get this customer off center. What do I need to do? This is just, I got too much going on. Super complex. What I always like to think about, as a leader, what did Moses have to go through? mean, he had a lot of stuff going on. Right? You know, he got to be a revolutionary leader who served an intermediary role between implementing the rules of God, but at the same time dealing with reluctant followers. He was a visionary leader. He used this to encourage the Israelites to leave the bondage in Egypt. But he also had to work, help them maintain their faith for 40 years in the desert. And he was a servant leadership who led not for himself, but those who followed him. And he got to be the conduit, really, between God and the people. So that can get pretty hectic. There's a lot going on. So just understand that what you're doing can be complex. What you're doing will be complex. You have a lot going on, but you have a lot of role models in what you get to do. In secular organization, leadership theories, trait theories, behaviors, skills, these are applied based on worldly standards. Okay? And there's nothing wrong with that because this stuff is actually good. We're going to talk about trait theory. We're going to talk about skills. This is actually good stuff. And where do you think that came from? It came from God, right? So it's there for us to use. Okay? And it will lead to positive results. However, there are sets of Christian leadership principles that kind of stop. We don't get that in traditional leadership. We don't get that in organizational leadership. And to be honest, at times, depending on the organization you're at, you're not encouraged to leverage any of this. Okay, so they're not going to share this with you, but you need to understand what's there for you to be a better leader. Okay. So I'm going to show a video. 5 things Jesus teaches us about leadership. It's super clear. I mentioned that the Bible is leadership book. Jesus is the best leader. Yeah, I watched this is a little different topic for me. And it's kind of new. And I'm a little nervous about it. I mean, you can ask Susie. I mean, I was out bugging her every 5 minutes about this thing. And she's like, it's going to be okay. Don't worry about it. It's fine. Some of you, contrary to popular belief, I'm not in my 30s. I'm a little bit older. And when you get a little bit older as a male, sometimes you end up having to get up at night to go to the restroom. So I got up, it's 5 o'clock in the morning, and I went back to bed. My wife had actually gone to sleep on the couch because she contends I snore. I've never heard myself snore, so I don't know. So I was in there, and a lot of times I'll turn on YouTube and I put on some sort of white noise, rain or beach kind of stuff, right? So I flipped on YouTube. The first video that popped out was about Jesus being a servant leader. And I got to watch that. And it really it's like, it's going to be fine. You can do this thing. It's not going to be a problem. And it allowed me to connect really with the topic matter that I have. Okay, so with this, we're going to show this video. It's about 5 minutes or something like that, where it talks about Jesus being a leader. And the cool thing I like to think about Jesus, and this was in this video last night, it kind of hit to me, that, you know, you hear about leaders, you know, these great minds in the past, Socrates, Einstein, all these guys, right? They were leading, living, doing things for years and years. But they pale in comparison to Jesus. And how long did Jesus teach? 3 years. So when you're thinking about leadership, you're thinking about your own leadership in the organization. Step back and let's take a look at that. And that's what we're going to do today. I want to show this video. We'll see how this works. And hopefully you guys can hear it.
Jesus said, those in the world lord over those subject to them, but not so in the kingdom of God. You want to be great in the kingdom? Then learn to be a servant of all. Today on Hot Topics, 5 things Jesus teaches us about leadership. Hi, this is Robert Furrow. If you're new here, consider subscribing and clicking the bell below so you can get all of our new videos. We are a fairly new YouTube page devoted to current events and hot topics through the lens of Scripture. The comment section is also open below, and we'd love to hear from you on what you think about this hot topic. Today, we want to consider leadership the Jesus style. There's a principle in Christian leadership called the inversion principle. That is that everything in the kingdom of God is turned upside down. You want to be great, you've got to learn to be a servant. You want to be first, you've got to be last, and so on. This is so different than modern motivational theory, which basically says believe in yourself, think positive, make your own reality, sell who you are to others, don't settle for leftovers, and get aggressive with getting what you want. This is so different than the teaching of Jesus. In the leadership lessons from Jesus, we learn that we are not to promote ourselves, that we are to take the position as a leader, that we walk by faith and trust him. And that is so powerful because Jesus said, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you can say to these mountains, be removed and cast into the sea. And God will work in our lives in powerful ways when we get a hold of these leadership principles that Jesus gives us. As Jesus was making his way to Jerusalem, for the last time, he would be crucified there. The disciples, starting all the way back in Galilee, began to talk about who was the greatest. They talked about it as they walked up to Jerusalem. Then there was the triumphant entry, and they talked about it again in the city. And then they talked about it on the night that Jesus was arrested, before when they were having the meal and Jesus got up and washed their feet. And then they talked about it when they were walking over to the Garden of Gethsemane. I love that Jesus never rebuked them for wanting to be great, but he certainly redirected them. He gave them a new idea as to what greatness was. So let's talk about those 5 things that Jesus teaches us about leadership. Number 1, don't take the best place. In Luke chapter 14, 1 through 14, Jesus tells the story of being invited to a dinner. And the Pharisees are there. And when it's time for dinner, they scramble. And kind of like today, we have the head of the table, which is reserved for maybe the patriarch or matriarch of the family. In their day, they had seats that were prominent seats and seats that were the least. And so they would scramble to take the best seat at the feast. And Jesus said, when you're invited to a feast, don't take the best seats, but take the least. That way, when someone sees you in the least, they'll say, hey, that's not for you. Come up to this one that is reserved from you. And don't take the best because he might say, that's reserved from somebody else and might remove you. And this is a picture that God gives us about our role as leaders, that we are not to promote ourselves, that we're not to take the best place, that we're to let God be the one who exalts and lifts us up, even taking the place of the least. Number 2, don't lord over people. In Luke 22:25, Jesus said, the Gentiles rule over people by lording over them, but not so among you. And in 1 Peter chapter 5, there in the first 3 verses, we're given direction as to how pastors are supposed to lead. Let me read those verses to you. 1 Peter 5:2 says, shepherd the flock of God which is among you, serving as overseers, not by compulsion, but willingly, not because you have to, but because you want to, not for dishonest gain, but eagerly wanting to minister to God's people, nor as being lords over those entrusted to you, but being examples to the flock. We are not to lord over them. And there's so many spiritual leaders, so many pastors, so many churches that allow the pastors to lord over the people, telling them what they can and cannot do. I've even seen them tell them who they can and cannot marry. We are supposed to give the information of Jesus. Jesus is the one who tells us what we are supposed to do and not do. And the job of a pastor or a leader is to equip the saints for the work of the ministry. Give them the information so that they can make good decisions. Third, become a servant. In Matthew 20 through 28, James and John, 2 of the prominent disciples of Jesus, send their mother to Jesus. And she says, I want you to do me a favor. Jesus says, well, what is it? And she says, let my son sit one on your right hand and the other on your left hand. Jesus says, can they be baptized in what I am baptized in? And then they answer. So they were tagging along with their mom when they asked, when she asked. And they say, yes, we can, speaking right off the top of their head. You think that they might want to say, well, what is that baptism? Jesus said, you will indeed be baptized with the baptism that I'm baptized with. But who sits on my right hand and left hand, that's up to my Father. Now, the baptism Jesus spoke of was his crucifixion. And it's interesting that James was the first disciple to be killed. He was killed with the sword by Herod, not the first martyr, that was Stephen, but the first of the 12 to be killed. And John lived a long life and probably even died of natural causes, but there was a lot of suffering and pain that went on in his life. So they indeed were baptized with the baptism that Jesus was baptized with. In John 13, 1 through 17, Jesus washes the disciples' feet. This is a sign of servanthood. They're arguing at the table, the Bible says, that night on who was going to be the greatest. I don't know whether it was at that time or not that Jesus got up, put a towel around his waist, and washed the disciples' feet. When he was done, he said, do you know what I've done for you? You call me Master and Lord, and you say so correctly. And what I have done for you, you do therefore for each other. He wasn't telling them to have foot washing ceremonies. He was saying serve one another. And when we learn to become servants to those that we are leading, then there's something very powerful that happens. Part of that is that we are becoming like Christ. Number 4, you must humble yourself. In Matthew 23, Jesus is unleashing on the Pharisees for all of the ways that they are leading wrongly. And he says to them, you love the best seats in the synagogue and being called teacher in the marketplace. They love the idea of people exalting them and looking up to them. Jesus said in Matthew 23, verse 12, that if you exalt yourself, then he will humble you. And if you humble yourself, then he will exalt you. This is good for us to know. Proverbs 3:34 says that God resists the proud, and we don't want God resisting us. And of course, Proverbs 16:18, pride comes before the fall, is important for all of us to remember. Number 5, do not promote yourself. Again, this is something that the Pharisees loved to do. They loved for people to know who they were and to take notice of them. In Proverbs 27:2, it says, do not let your lips praise you, and not your own mouth, an outsider, and not your own lips. In other words, let somebody else praise you and don't do that yourself. I like to say, don't break your arm while you're patting yourself on the back. Jesus said the first will be last and the last will be first. And he said to take the last place. That's putting other people's interests above your own. Philippians 3:2-4 says this, let nothing be done through selfish ambition and conceit, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than himself. For each of you look out not only for his own interest, but also for the interests of others. It's not that we're not to look out for our own interests, but we're to look out for the interests of other people as well. In Matthew 18:1-5, the disciples come to him and ask him, how do you become great in the kingdom? They've been talking about it a lot in the background, but now they just come directly to it. And Jesus takes a child and sets that child in front of them. And here's what he says in verse 2 of Matthew 18. Then Jesus called a little child, set him in the midst of them, and said, assuredly I say to you, unless you are converted and become like one of these children, you will by no means enter the kingdom. They were talking about how to be great in the kingdom, and Jesus says you have to become like a child to be able to even enter into the kingdom. Then he says, therefore, whoever humbles himself as a little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever receives one little child like this in my name receives me. And so here Jesus teaches us that we've got to become like a child in order to be great. That is, we don't think too much of ourselves, that we've learned to be servants, that we've learned that there's nothing that is beneath us. And as we take these principles and we apply them to our leadership, I believe that we will be incredibly effective for the glory of God and for the sake of Christ. And then you let God take care of you. One thing to remember as we look at these 7 things is in Psalms 75, 6-7. It says, for exaltation comes neither from the east, nor from the west, nor from the south, but God is the judge. He puts down one and he exalts another. What we want really is what God wants for us. We want our lives to count. I don't know that ambition is wrong. Selfish ambition is definitely wrong. Don't do anything for selfish ambition. But when we're ambitious and we want to do something for the kingdom of God, when we want our lives to count and our lives to matter, that's a good thing. As long as we follow these principles that Jesus taught us about leadership, which is so radically different from the world. If you enjoyed this video, then click the like button below.
I clicked the like button, so you don't have to. No, these are the 5 things. You had some other stuff in there. There's nothing here that you can't do as an individual. Being a servant, leading for others. These are the things that are going to help you be successful as a leader. Again, regardless of where you're doing this leadership. So we're going to roll through. I got a couple of things I'm going to need you guys to write down and think about. I've got some tips that you can think about to implement for yourself as a leader as we go. So we're going to start out. I want you guys to take your paper out again. I want you to list, and it's going to be short. This is like, I don't need 1,000-word paragraphs. And again, we're not necessarily going to go around and share. If anybody wants to, that's fine. 3 times in your professional experience when you felt that you failed in accomplishing the goal that you received. And for each case, put 3 words that describe how you felt at the time. So we're going to take a couple minutes, but jot down some stuff. And again, you're going to get the slides. You can do this stuff later. And if you want to expand out to the multi-paragraphs, you're welcome to do that. Okay. You guys keep thinking about this. When I think about it, I said, I've had a number of successes in my life and doing things, leading. But if I had to narrow it down to 3 failures, I don't know. Take me more time to figure out which 3 failures I'm going to pick than actually writing them down. Because it just happens. I mean, it just is what it is. I've done, like I said, a lot of different leadership training, leadership theory, different things of that nature. But as I've had these challenges, I've often felt pressure, this sense of failure, some embarrassment that things didn't go well. Several years ago, I was doing some other things around workforce, helping out the college, and we put on a job fair. Had 75 companies there. And we have them spread out through this one floor of the college. And I don't know that we had 75 students. So, I had people that I worked for, we were saying this was bad. I had, businesses calling me saying, hey, what's going on? What's the problem? I didn't charge them anything other than their time, but, it was a failure. And I just remember after it was over, literally sitting up there by myself, having these feelings, feeling I was all by myself. It was all about me. It was my thing. I blew it. It didn't work. The important thing that I came to realize is nothing's random. For me, this happened for a reason. It's not accidental. And I shouldn't fight it. My first tip, you have to know that you're not alone as you're doing these things. You take Isaiah 41:10, do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteousness in my right hand. As a Christian in a secular organization, if you acknowledge this, if you know this, if you know that you're not alone, if you know when things happen, they happen for a reason. You're going to be able to have an impact as a leader. Plans developed using biblical principles will fit God's plan. From this preparation, the work of the leaders can be laid out. God knows what the plan is. You may not know what the plan is. You stay on track. You do the work. Believe in God that He will bring you the plan. It will happen. Doesn't mean that there won't be downturns, because they happen for a reason. So, as it relates to this, So I shared one of my challenges. I have many, many more. But does anybody want to share anything? Anybody have comments relating to that? Yeah.
And failed at, I was on a particular job. And I'm not previously, like, I can focus saying anything to anybody, and I felt like I was on by myself. I was the only one. Everybody else was reaching the was for us to eat, and until I said something, I think that sometimes things will change. And there are other times that you should not say anything, but this was one of those times.
Yeah, I mean, if you have situations where you just kind of wallow in self-pity, I'm not doing this, I'm not good enough, all of that, it's not going to get better. Again, if you trust in God to help move you forward, to give you the strength to ask and speak up and do these things, you'll get to where you want to get to. And as a Christian leader within these organizations, this is a great example of how you can use these tools to move yourself as a leader. In some cases, again, help others that you're leading. So let's talk real briefly about what is leadership. So again, it's this act of seeking solutions to affect outcomes. It's what we're looking at. I mentioned organizational leadership associated with accomplishment of business goals. Leaders harness these resources to impact performance. Regardless of where you are in the food chain of an organization, you get to be a leader, bring resources to do what you need to do. Leadership is exhibited in many different disciplines, done many different ways, impacted by varied events and circumstances. So you always have a lot of things coming at you, a lot of opportunities for you to choose different alternatives and do different things as a leader. The value of Christian leadership, which we've mentioned, is that, God guides the leader's actions. This focus for the Christian leaders to utilize the secular approaches to leadership and the relationship to God based on the scriptures. It's going to strengthen you as a leader, regardless of what the organization is doing. Talk about being a leader. Talk about trait theory. Trait theory identifies characteristics and attributes held by people that are suited to be leaders. Organizations determine, as they are leaders or they're looking for people to run, managers, different things like that, they identify specific traits that an individual that would be a good leader should possess. And that's what they look for. We think about trait theory, we've got self-confidence, decisiveness, energy, resilience, need for achievement, willingness to assume responsibility, flexibility, a service mentality, personal integrity, and emotional maturity. These are traits that good leaders have, but not every leader has on tap. There are some that you may have that are better, that are stronger. You need to acknowledge what traits you have that make you a good leader. So I want to have you list, I'm going to put the list up again. Top 3 traits that you think make you a good leader. Okay. And then, what you feel your 2 least strong traits are. Again, we're not taking forever, and you don't even have to put, hey, it's resiliency because of X, Y, and Z for purposes of what we're doing. There's a list of you. So your top 3 traits and your bottom 2 traits. I got something. You're gonna get slides, the whole list and the definitions. I didn't take the time to get through that. Yeah,
Did you say anybody has?
I was going to. That's next.
Oh.
Anybody have anything?
Oh, is that what this is my mind for the last several slides.
Jeff, can you hear him?
Okay.
Not really.
No.
No.
Okay. I was thinking this up front when you were talking about leadership and traits. And the word trait means defining characteristic, right? It's a definition of a defining character. In us in technology, though, they have some technology, and this is true with every organization, but that you run into this situation. When I was a kid, so I've been in technology since I was in the 70s, right? And I never thought in a million years I'd ever see a software update on NBC Nightly News, right? Facebook's updating their software tonight. It's on their news, I never thought in my wildest dreams I'd ever see something hit the national news like a software update, I mean, this never even entered my mind, but yet we live in a different world today where technology is this thing. But if you really want to break something, technology will do it for you. Everybody that's ever been in the technology field has seen these disasters happen that, like right now, there's some disasters happening. There's some absolute infiltration going on in government and others of, viruses and all kinds of stuff happening today. So I was trying to apply this, Mike, to the leadership part of just leading a team and leading a group through what I'd call these technology events, where, if you have all the corporate information for a company on your servers and you're managing it all, and then some disaster happens, right? Where they can't work anymore. It's shut down. This absolutely happens in my experience, right? I've experienced this before.
Right.
And so when you're looking at failures, like you're Apollo 13, there is no failure. You can't fail at that. So, there is no excuse for it. There's no real forgiveness for it. I mean, these are cataclysmic things that happen in the world today. And I know, and Jeff, in your world, where you're taking, it's some of these are matters of life and death, right? I mean, they really are. I mean, and some of it not only physically, but also emotionally, in other ways. You could just totally pop somebody's balloon and have a hard time recovering, over. And that's kind of what you talked about earlier. You're leading people emotionally through different times in life and these events, and they're just trying to care for people. We're just trying to get through the day. I remember when my son Nick was he was on life support for a month, and the head nurse there told me, she goes, well, a good day is when I don't lose anybody, that was a good day for her, and I was trying to relate to that, I was like, well, okay, that's a good day for her, okay, but that's her world, and so we're talking about leadership today. And God, one of the things I've noticed that, and Mike, you talked about this a little bit earlier, is as a leader is praying for your team. Sometimes you can't fix it. You can't fix everything. You're a team leader. You can't do, you're relying on the team to do their thing, And I don't know if you're like me, a type A personality, you're wanting to fix it all by yourself and you can't do it. So it just drives me crazy. But one thing you can do is just bring in the Lord. You're like praying, like, God, I just prayed for my team. And you're probably gonna get to this, obviously, but it's just been last 3 slides. It's been like, we're talking about, hey, how did you fail? What did you do? How do you feel about it? Or, even what are your traits? I will tell you the strongest trait any of us have as a Christian is praying for our team, praying for the outcomes of these people and what's going on, And so intermingle that in there somewhere, because by the way, this isn't all up to you. If it was, it's not for everybody. Believe me, you can't fix it all by yourself, But I think we're in that part of the world today, right? You can't find the right person to work at this. Not everybody's out there, and but you can pray the right person in, How about that, So that's just on my mind, Mike. So
Yeah.
I hope I didn't jump out too much on you, but
No, that's great.
But when in doubt, pray. How's that?
I love it.
Absolutely. Kind of along with that, so I asked you guys to put down your top 3. What I like to think about is everybody thinks about, okay, I need to focus on the bottom 2. I got to get better at the bottom 2. And it doesn't mean you don't get to try to get better.
Yeah.
But why would you not double down on the ones that you're really good at? Spend more time with that. Spend more time, pray for how you can implement those to better serve your people. So don't fixate as much on what you're bad at. You can ask for strength to get better. You can ask for strength to learn that, but double down on what you're really good at, because that's going to come to you and it's going to make a bigger impact. When we think about these traits, these traits are really deployed in everything, but they're deployed in secular organizations. But they tend to stop kind of when we're talking about the goals, right? We're going to stop at that trait because we're not going to then connect it to your Christian purpose. this, as a Christian leader, is something that you want to do. As Rob was saying, as I was saying, I mean, seek wisdom, the knowledge, experience, and relationship with God to be able to implement what you're good at, these traits. People ask sometimes, and this was one of my assignments, Jeff, I don't know if you had an assignment, are people born leaders or are they created as leaders? And the answer is both. You know, you have traits, you've been given traits, you are strong at certain things. But you can also seek training to become strong in other things or stronger in those things. So you get to be both. So when you think about traits, we have the list of traits. Everybody, this is what leadership traits. Now there's probably more, but these are the 10 top leadership traits that you're going to find in most organizations. So I think of tip 2, Christian leaders should seek to utilize the traits they've been given that will allow them to lead. Trust that the Lord has a purpose for placing you in a time and place to serve as a leader. So the Lord has the plan. The Lord is putting you where you can be part of the plan. Jeff, you want to share that verbally? I think you just put some comment in.
Yeah, you're right. I did have that assignment. And I thought a lot about that, I think about, just genetically, like my father, I look at him and he was an executive for a large textile company. And when he was working, and he had specific traits, right, that I saw in him that, I think, and the world would see in him, right, that would say, okay, he's a leader because he has A, B, C, D, and E. And so, of course, I do that self-evaluation myself and look at others, that, maybe I aspire to be like, to learn from, and see those traits that they have in them. What I've found in both myself and in my own individual research is that people change when they're in Christ. Those traits that they have, either they're emphasized through that relationship with the Lord, or they're given new tools, right, in their tool belts that help them to grow and develop, to be the leader that the Lord wants us to be. So, what you said really just highlighted that thought in my mind.
Thank you. So now we'll talk about learning to lead. These are leadership skills. So we've talked about the traits. Now, really, it's kind of the skills. It's training around giving you the skills to leverage these traits, to be a leader, to have your impact. Again, leadership skills are what allows leaders to lead. Leadership skills are the key driver of employee performance and improvement. Leadership skills and the training is really what allows you then to ultimately learn to connect to employees, increase engagement, performance, different things of that nature. It's really, again, taking the traits that you have and learning how to leverage them and how to actually lead individuals. So we've had, some folks talk about, everything you guys talked about. I'm assuming that you've had some level of training somewhere along the line that would help you learn to do these things. Again, leadership skills can be improved. So we say, are they born or created, or they're learned. So it's both, as we said before. Yeah. We mentioned that some people may be predisposed to being stronger at certain skills. But again, you will be put where you get to be to do what you do. And it will leverage your skills. Leadership skills often are broken down into 6 areas: communication skills, social skills, influence skills, analytical skills, technical skills, and the proclivity for continual learning. I will say that depending on what I'm doing, may be good, may not be good. It's some of this, right? Technical skills, you don't want me carrying a screwdriver in to do anything without a problem. But there are certain ones of these that I'm good at, that I've got training in, that I've learned through trial and error to be stronger. I want to talk real briefly about communication skills, because honestly, communication skills is what drives all the rest of it. If you study leadership approaches, there's transactional, charismatic, transformational. Communication skills are the driver that drives all of that. And communication skills are critical to creating cohesiveness of an organization. You need to know how to speak to your team. You talk about your team. How do you dialogue with that team? How do you deal with that team? How do you lead that team as opposed to pushing that team to do things? I mean, you talked about the goals and different things of that nature. So again, it was unclear that whether these goals were appropriate or inappropriate, and it wasn't until you spoke up that anything was done about it.
And isn't it important communication to understand with your team, like may need and it's just to where externally have experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think the leadership skills component is how you learn to do these things.
Okay.
Right.
But it stay home. You know. A distraction.
Right.
So I have
No, you're right.
It's gonna be on.
Also,
Right.
although you so
Yeah.
Thank you.
So again, we're all at different places, we're all in different things. So again, trusting, asking for guidance, you'll end up where you get to end up, where you should end up. And these are pieces that can help you do this in a more traditional approach. But again, what I'm saying too is to think about, got traits. The organization has traits. AEP is going to talk about traits. Honda's going to talk about traits. Nationwide, all of those are going to talk about, these are traits that they're looking for. And then they're going to have skill training. They're going to have training that helps you improve to be a leader. And as you do that leading at AEP, or you get the training, or you get the skill set, that can be leveraged other places. Okay, there's a reason that you're at AEP, that they're doing this, that's going to make you stronger in your passion or where you should be, right? One thing I want to point out, when we talk about communication, again, Jesus as a communicator was the most effective communicator ever. He would embody not only the truths he shared, but he would communicate those truths based on the experience and wording of those he shared with. As Jesus grew up as a teenager, he learned what many of the people that he ultimately was ministering to needed, and how to communicate with them so that they would understand and do this. And we see so many times in communication now where it's like, I don't care who's in the audience, I'm going to do it this way. Okay. Whereas communication skills is doing, we call receiver-oriented communication, where you identify the audience needs and wants. And the communication is tailored from their perspective with the increased understanding to give buy-in and action. Again, this is a key piece of being a servant. It's not about me, it's about you. And how I can share that information with you. So tip 3, communicating with kind speech and truth, allow the message to be comprehended and be impactful regardless of the audience. So if you use the receiver-oriented communication and you share that kind speech, it's going to be received much better than we crank out an email saying you can do X, Y, and Z. Leadership behaviors. What page am I on now? Leadership behaviors is how you do what you do. Leadership behaviors is the implementation of the traits and the skills to do what you do. And these behaviors are essential as leaders seek to determine what is to be done, who will do it, and how it connects to the organizational goals. So it's really important in a secular organization who has guidelines, it has rules, it has different things and different pieces, that you understand what the organizational goals are. Because if you implement these behaviors and you drive with Christian orientation, you're going to be successful. The organization will be successful because you will be able to drive this performance. And when we talked about, when I asked you guys, tell me about an example of you being a leader. Different types of organizational behaviors. You have task-oriented behaviors. These are things that you have to do on a day-to-day basis. Here's the task. This is what has to happen. You have people-oriented behavior. So this is where you're now interacting with your team, coworkers, external customers, different things of that nature. So again, it's taking the traits and the skills to strengthen. And then organizational leadership is this strategic big picture kind of thing. Okay. So I would say that everybody is doing some level of this all the time. Okay. So it doesn't matter where you work, what you do, because again, task-oriented behavior, and you get this done, this done. People-oriented behavior, regardless, whether it's people who report to me, people who are on the same level, anybody I'm touching and working with, I get to be a leader for them. And this strategic big picture within an organization, if you're at AAP, you may not be sitting in the boardroom, the strategic retreat. But oftentimes the strategic direction is coming down. So how do I work within that structure to strengthen and improve the organization? What I'm doing. So I'm kind of short on time, so I'm not going to have you do this, but you might make a note. Think about in your current leadership position, what percentage of your time is spent in these things? Okay. Then list 3 tasks that you do in your number 1 behavior. 2 tasks in your number 2, 1 task in your number 3. And the reason I ask you to do that, and like I said, we're not going to do it because they're super short, but remember I said at the beginning, you need to acknowledge that you are doing these things. Because it's so easy just to go into work. I'm at work, be there at 8, get a car, drive, get there, get out, get sit where I'm supposed to sit, I gotta do what I'm doing. And I do what I did yesterday, and I don't do what I do. But think about as a leader, what are you doing? Okay, everybody is leading. And the behavior is how we do it. So tip 4, as a leader, direct behavior through modeling the desired behavior. Be the example. I'm sure a lot of us have had supervisors, you've heard stories, the supervisor would say one thing, do as I say, don't do as I do. Right? Be the example. It says in 1 Peter 5, 2 and 3, don't lord it over people assigned to you, but lead them through your own example. So when we think about leadership, leadership is a process of influencing followers' actions to achieve a collective goal. That's what leadership really is. We may have outcomes we're looking for, but leadership is working with the individuals to do this. Spiritual leadership practices increases the importance of values, servant, spiritual, and ethical leadership. So as a Christian leader within a secular organization, you bring these things to the table that's going to make you stronger and have better results. Spiritual leadership really is to create this value and vision congruence to ultimately foster higher levels of organizational performance. I'm going to show a video, and this is not that long, but I'm talking about serving and leadership habits. This is from Ken Blanchard, who wrote 1 Minute Manager.
And the last and the final thing that we want to cover is if your heart's right, you want to serve and your head's in the right place and you got good thoughts and feelings about serving and your hands aren't. What keeps it all going and keeps the evil one away is what are your habits? And Jesus had 5 habits that we'll cover in different ways today. One was solitude. You know, he went off by himself a number of times. How many of you ever spend some time in quiet without, you know, reading something or listening and all? I see some hands up, and that's great. I bet it's peaceful. And Jesus did it in powerful times. He did it right after he was baptized. He went away for 40 days. I mean, Satan was stupid to pick on him after 40 days of, you know, finding out who he was and whose he was. And then he went off after John the Baptist was killed, and he found that out, I think, to deal with grief. He went off after he fed the 5,000, I think, probably to deal with pride, you know, because they wanted to make him king. My favorite was he was healing one day, and all the disciples were getting real excited. This could be a really good business. And that night, you know, he healed Peter's mother-in-law, and the crowds the next day were gathered. And the line in the Bible, I just love, early the next morning, Jesus went off to a solitary place by himself to pray. And when the disciples rose up, they ran around, where is he? And they came to get him and said, come, everybody's waiting for you. Did he care about those people? Sure he did. There was no more caring. But he said, no, let's go to the next village so I can preach, for that is why I have come. Because there's going to be positive things that are going to draw you away from things that you're supposed to do. And so solitude, prayer, he was constantly praying to his Father. You know, prayer is just so important. Don't make it your last resort. Make it your first response. And then what he did is he knew Scripture. That was always blew my mind. I mean, you know, the devil tempts him, and he could have said, hey, get out of here. You know, I'm second in command at best, you know. What did he do? He said each time, it is written. He knew the Scriptures, and you need to know the Scriptures. That's so powerful. Third, he had a small group that he could be more intimate with. Do you have people around you that can tell you the truth and you can share more with, like he did with John and James and Peter? And then finally, this is probably the most important habit of all. He believed in the unconditional love of his Father. Absolutely. Those are really important habits.
So this gets back to really what Rob was talking about. These 5 pieces, again, I've been thinking about this, and this is stuff that I've been doing. And then all of a sudden it comes kind of fruition to where we are. But as leaders, it's important. Hey. And as Christian leaders, step away and pray, talk to the Lord. But step, like he said, don't wait till you got a problem. Do it up front. You know, close relationships. I think it's really important as a leader, especially a leader in an organization, to have this kind of peer relationship that you can get together with these individuals in maybe within the organization or other people that kind of do leadership or whatever, you know. A Bible study is great. You should do that. With people in the organization or leaders, they're doing things like that. That's the dialogue you're going to have. Okay. And then again, ultimately, trust in the Lord to get you where you get to be.
Culture. That you're living in most cases.
Yeah.
So anything to do with your Jesus. It's just key.
Yeah. Sure.
And I would on that if you don't. I've also had the. Here's why I did or anything from a secular perspective. Okay, how do you every day? The answer I came to is just sit roots of the Spirit every day. But if they person, this is not even recognized. So, our quarterly and but if those, so
Very good.
Yeah.
It's about the experience.
exactly.
It is. We think about it's with him and you take that away from us. It's just be the Bible.
Mhm.
Just
The word of it's something.
Yeah.
Right now, the word
Nothing's random.
nothing is. Wow.
So, in the interest of time, again, she's gonna get the slides. I encourage you to do this. Think through those 5 pieces. Okay. Which is most important? We need to do to improve on it. What can you do in the next 30 days to improve this habit? Okay. We need to take action. We need to have timing to do it. Okay. If I say I'm going to do X, and I don't say I'm going to do it in 30 days, and it doesn't take 30 days, but I'm going to work on it in 30 days. Even if I don't do it, and you came to me and said, how's that going? Hey, I'm working on it. I never get to it because I didn't say I'm going to do it in 30 days. I just said I'm going to do it. You need to put time into it. There you go. Tip 5, be the servant in order to truly be. And all 3 of this. All right, we're almost done. Christian leadership and model organizations require merging the fundamentals of organizational theory and the truths of the scripture. A great point. That's really what the point is here. You don't have to quote scripture. You get to embody that. And, Christian leaders maximize the decision-making process in a manner that positively impacts the organization and brings glory to God. And I think that sometimes organizations, not secular, non-believers, they don't feel that this part's important. It's just about the organization. Okay. We get to bring this to the organization as leaders. And this allows you to stay true to your Christian principles of being a servant first, respecting others, and leading with humility. Okay. And then, Christian leaders should be especially cognizant that they've been asked to be part of God's mission, walking with Christ, not pursuing an undertaking of their own on God's behalf. Okay. Ask for guidance, pray, be there, and you will be successful leader. So that's what I have. I actually have 1128. So right.
With some cars, so they had to skip out. But wow, I think it's definitely not random that God has you, Mike, at the SBDC and Columbus State Community College to live this out in a very secular space. Very intentional.